From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous episodes, all of our upcoming episodes, and all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean. And Sean, how are you this wonderful evening?
John, I would really love a cup of coffee.
Would you now?
Just a coffee, maybe a movie. You want to go to the circus? Circus is in town.
I will only take you to get coffee if you teach my child how to kick someone in the nuts, then kick him in the face.
I can do that. I'm the man for the job.
So, Sean, what have you been up to? What have you been watching this week? I know it's only been a couple days since we recorded last, but do you have anything new under the belt that you'd like to speak on?
Just two things, really. I've been watching, well, I've not been watching. I watched the first one. I'll start with good and bad again, kind of like we did last week. I watched the 1991 movie Run. I finally finished it. I know that I had started it a while ago, but finally finished it. Patrick Dempsey, Kelly Preston. Patrick Dempsey plays a law student who is transporting cars or something for extra money, and he's supposed to drive from Boston to Atlantic City. And I think along the way he gets stopped, and he has to stay overnight or whatever, and he's gonna go be a high roller in this local casino. And he gets involved in this high stakes poker game with a local mobster's son, and they get in a fight because Patrick Dempsey's like winning a bunch of money, and the mobster's son guys, he doesn't like that. He doesn't like to lose. So they get in this scuffle, and the big mobster son dude slips and hits his head on like a table, and it kills him. So the rest of this movie,
as you
Patrick Dempsey, yeah, it just happens sometimes. Patrick Dempsey is doing the titular running, and he's trying to get away from everybody and get out of town. And it ends up that Kelly Preston steps in to help him. I had seen it before. I'd seen it a while ago. Like I said, it's from 91. I feel like I had seen it probably around 95 because I remember the commercials on TV, and it was a rental, like a video store rental. And I hadn't seen it since, and I remembered it being pretty good. This movie is like pretty hard to find. It's not really readily available out there. So I ended up watching a VHS rip of it, but I liked it just as much as I did the first time. I don't think it's like the best movie of all time, but it's pretty good. The other thing that I watched is I watched a movie from 1988. It's called Twice Dead. And I recognized the cover, and that's why I watched it, because I remember seeing it in video stores a lot. And it's basically, on the cover is a guy in a tuxedo who, I don't know who he looks like. Maybe he looks like Weekend at Bernie's Bernie, but with his hair kind of slicked back. And he's jumping through, it looks like broken glass, and he's got a knife in his hand and a noose around his neck. You're probably pulling up the cover right now.
I am, because it sounded familiar and I couldn't remember it, but continue.
Well, basically, it's about a family that moves into this house that they inherited, and the house is haunted. And these local gang members, no, not by Gary Busey. These local gang members are there, and they're kind of hanging out in front of the house, and they give the family a hard time. And they don't start to harass just the kids, but they harass the whole family. But the two kids are like high school age, so they really get harassed. The whole movie kind of goes back and forth between these. There's this little subplot of the haunted house, the ghost, I guess, and these gang members. And the gang members try to like do a home invasion while the kids are home and the parents are away at some trial or something. And the ghost kind of takes over, and the ghost starts siding on the side of the family. But you find out that the ghost has like ulterior motives as to why he's helping out the family. It's not great. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you have nostalgia for it for some reason, but it wasn't like, if we were doing hot dogs, it would probably get, I don't even know if you get half a hot dog. It wasn't horrible, but it just wasn't, I don't know, it felt like kind of a waste of time, to be honest. I don't know. But other than that, just catching up on regular TV shows. I've been watching this show. My family, we're really big fans of Amazing Race. So Amazing Race just started, and there's a show out of the UK called Race Across the World, and it's a little bit different. Amazing Race, they fly, they do whatever, they take whatever transport, but they have these like checkpoints and stuff that they have to do. And Race Across the World, each season centers on like a continent or a country, and they can't fly. there's no challenges. There's no real timeline to them getting from checkpoint to checkpoint, but they have a limited budget and they have to spend this budget to like get to different places. So I'm watching the 3rd season right now, and it's all in Canada. So they start in Vancouver, and I think they have to end someplace on the east coast of Canada, and they have to go, like, some of the checkpoints take them all the way up to like the really far north of Canada, and they're kind of like Carson City, like way up in British Columbia, and just other places where the other seasons have been really interesting because they hitch a lot of rides, or they take a lot of overnight buses. They can take jobs to earn more money because, maybe their budget's running kind of slim. This one is a lot different because there's like not a lot of transport. There's kind of like one way to get a lot of places and one way to get a lot of places out. And they have to hitchhike and do ride shares and all this other stuff. So it's interesting. I see a lot of stuff on these shows where it's like, oh, I never thought about going to Winnipeg. And you see them in Winnipeg and you're like, oh, that looks really cool. And Winnipeg's probably a bad example, but you'll see them someplace like Vancouver Island and you're like, that looks like a really cool place to visit. And then you think, well, I'd have to fly out there. I'd be there a week. What am I going to do for a week on Vancouver Island? So we've been kind of discussing our Trans-Canada possible vacation coming up. But that's what I've been watching. John, how about you?
So for me, I watched some stuff this week. I'm actually going to start with a separate, just 2 episodes of a podcast recommendation. I listened today to, the podcast name is Krista Makes a Podcast, or his name is Chris Demakes, and it's spelled Demakes, Makes. And basically, he's the lead singer for the band Less Than Jake, and he just gets other artists on and breaks down a song from their catalog, like everything about it, the lyrics, the writing process, from, start to finish.
Soup to nuts.
Exactly. So he had Fat Mike on from NOFX talking about The Decline, which is kind of a weird concept for a punk song because it's almost 19 minutes long and it's played by an entire orchestra, which is very different. I'd actually strongly recommend anyone listen to this song, not just because it's musically kind of super impressive, but for a song that came out, or an album, it's sold as an EP, so it's its own album if you were to go to get it, and you can find it on YouTube for free with like an entire harmonic orchestra or whatever behind him doing the whole thing too, which is also great. But it's very relevant to what's happening in the world in 2025, and it's basically a 26-year-old song at this point. The podcast goes over 2 episodes. Usually his episodes are about an hour long with, like, it feels like 15 minutes of ads right in the fucking middle of it. So there's a lot of skipping around in there, but it's really cool. Like, because this one's, maybe it's just because it's a longer song, but there's so much more that went into this than your average, like, 3 chords, some drums, and a bass line, and the word fuck 30 times. It was cool hearing just the guy who wrote the song go through his writing process with it, what he was actually saying with these lyrics that, you might have missed a word or might have misinterpreted, hear the actual intention behind them. It was, I've listened to a bunch of different episodes of that. It's kind of one of those shows that it's like, oh, I like this song or I like this guest. I'm willing to, check it out for that. It's one of those podcasts. I like one of those podcasts that talks about weird and obscure movies or something, but it's definitely worth going back. And if you have a couple hours to kill, checking out. I did note down the episode numbers. It's episode 159 and 160. I have no idea where he's at now, but it came out in 2023. So I would guess he's probably several episodes past that. That might help you narrow it down.
So are you telling me that this song is much like The Running Man, the movie?
No, I don't think so.
You said it had a lot to do with current events, just like The Running Man.
Well, The Running Man's, evergreen. So it's always exactly current. I also watched the movie Doom Asylum, which I think I went into that movie just because it had Patty Mullen in it. Like, that was, and it had kind of a fun poster. Like, it was like, all right, I don't see enough movies with Patty Mullen. Like, there's the obvious, there's Frankenhooker, which is probably her biggest claim to fame outside of maybe when she was in Penthouse. But that never really got like a huge release or anything like that. And she got a couple other things. This movie is basically about a shitbag lawyer that just like sued the hell out of someone. I don't remember why, but He's like tooling up the road with some random chick, gets in an accident, and they think he's dead, so they take him to a morgue, which happens to be in a like weirdly trashed asylum for some reason. Turns out he's not quite dead. He gets up and starts, basically for the rest of the movie, he's just killing whoever's alive around him and ripping off bad one-liners that are kind of like legal puns, kind of, all while Patty Mullen's running around in a bikini with matching high heels. Is it good? Not really, not particularly. It's gory though. It's kind of fun. It's kind of stupid. The characters, like, outside of Patty Mullen they're the kind of characters that are so fucking obnoxious. You're like, could you just kill them already for fuck's sake? Just so they stop talking. Like, you know, that type of cast. But for what it is, I'm pretty sure that's on Tubi right now. It's 80s crap cinema. It's not the best thing. It's not the worst thing, but this is what we do around.
I have to know, at any point, does he say, I'm not dead yet?
I don't think so. If you're referring to like the Monty Python whip.
Of course.
I mean, there's a scene where he's early in the movie, like when you realize he's not dead, where he starts talking. And I don't remember him saying that specifically, but I don't really want to watch it again to confirm or deny.
All right.
So
enough said.
Yeah. The only other thing I watched this week that I'll bring up right now, because why not? There's a new Manson documentary, Charles Manson, not Marilyn, on Netflix called Chaos, the Manson Murders, and it's basically, it speaks to the like Charles Manson, how fascinating of a weird fucking person he was, because he is. Like, you can't, I mean, I guess you can, but for me, like, he's kind of undeniably like fascinating, because just like his whole story and everything that he did and everything that he influenced and blah blah blah, it's nuts. Like, and there's so many like weird theories around it, and this presents all that information pretty well. Like, it's well told, it's well depicted. They get a lot of good, you know, actual footage of Charlie and the family and so on. The only problem I really have with it, unless you're just totally fresh to who Charles Manson is, there's really nothing new in this like documentary. Like, they even start like by the end of it going into the like, you know, the potential MK Ultra tie-in that, you know, I'm sure you've heard that theory that he was a MK Ultra agent or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They go into that, and they go into some of the like government conspiracy stuff with it and whatnot, and they don't ever really offer any more proof of that than what, again, if you followed the Charles Manson case, anything more than what you've heard before. So it's all wrapped up in a nice little package, but it doesn't really provide anything new. I feel like I said this about a Netflix documentary relatively recently. I just can't think of what one it was, and I guess that's kind of, was it OJ? Okay.
Yeah.
I guess that's just kind of, you know, they're just circling the drain with these, maybe, or maybe they're just realizing, well, if we put a, you know, crazy murder story in there, people are going to watch it, whether they've seen it or not. It's probably a little bit of both. I don't know. I'm not going to go as far to say that I would not watch it, but I would say don't go into it expecting some new Charles Manson revelation, because it's just not there. So,
yeah, I think with all those,
this week.
I think with those, it's like, it's a big name. People are fascinated because it's a pretty fascinating kind of whole story. So why not just keep cranking them out, even if it's the same thing, you know?
And I get that. And I mean, I guess you could always make the argument it's kind of like remastering Star Wars or something. Like, people are going to watch it again because it's cleaned up and looks better, or all that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does it make it better? Debatably, no. I'd say pretty definitively no, but they keep doing it.
Hand shot first.
Yes. Past that, the only other thing I've been watching is that Celtic City show that I talked about a couple weeks ago. Still liking that. Still really into that. Have you gotten a chance to look into that yet?
No, I'm about to start it.
So I dig that. I'd be interested to hear if you're if you like it as well, or if anyone does, because I don't know anyone that's watching it.
Does anybody like this shit? I need to know.
Well, Greg reached out and said that he was going to start watching it, but he hasn't. I don't know if he's done it yet, so I don't know if he likes it or not. But yeah, I haven't heard anyone else talking about it. I'm kind of wondering if it's going to turn into one of those HBO things that's like really good, but just stays under the radar the whole run of it for some reason. Or I don't know. Maybe I just don't hang out in enough basketball circles to really know.
Yeah.
Could be.
Speaking of really good that goes under the radar, do you want to take a break and we come back and talk about our movie?
Let's do that. Let's take a quick break. We're going to come back and we are going to start the best month since Crummy Movie March, Gary Busey April. So
I can't believe you held it this long. You haven't mentioned that it's going to be a Gary Busey month.
I got thrown off with our technical difficulties to start this episode.
All right. Well, how about we come back and we refresh it?
All right. We'll be back in just a minute, and we are going to talk some Gary Busey shit. Quite literally. AI John here. Have you ever wanted to take a deeper dive on the mysteries surrounding the lives and deaths of notable figures?
I feel like I'm asking myself that every day, but I'm old and don't know where to get this kind of information.
Well, I've got the podcast for you. The Between the Facts podcast looks at the events that define their legacies, unearthing hidden truths, alternative narratives, and the theories that keep us questioning the official narrative.
Now, that sounds like something I can dig into. Where can I listen to this show?
You can find Between the Facts and a lot of other great podcasts at youronpodcast.com. I guarantee that you'll find something there for you. We are back, and as mentioned, for some reason, we decided that we're going to do another theme month, and this month we landed on the only theme that made sense. There might be another theme month coming up real soon, but for now, it is Gary Busey April, or April Busey. It's Gary Busey April. We're going to start this month by talking about a movie that is technically a thriller, and it's called Hider in the House. As per usual, we're going to start over with a third-party review, and there's not a lot of them on this movie, at least not on Rotten Tomatoes, and this one comes from Anonymous, and this says, "No reviews, you fuckers. The moral of this film is not to let Gary Busey out on early parole, or else he's going to squat in a newly built house that some yuppie couple has just purchased, who call each other babe, whatever the fuck that means, share. Also, going to live in your attic, made a miniature version of your house with miniature versions of you in them, as well as himself. You'll also probably kill your dog. Also, this movie has a great poster. You should watch it based solely off of that. 3 out of 5 stars. So
I gotta agree. I think that you should watch this movie just based on the poster, because that's what we did. Are you familiar with?
Generally do.
Are you familiar with the term frogging with a PH?
I am, but refresh my memory. I know I've heard it, but I can't think of it at the moment.
Basically, it's the concept of this movie: living in a house with other people inhabiting it, but not showing any signs that you live there, like not disturbing anything as to give them the idea that someone else is there.
So not exactly the concept of this movie.
Well, pretty damn close, I think.
We're going to get into it. So
we'll get into
for us to do that, John, why don't you tell us what Hider in the House is all about?
Yeah, so for that, I go over to IMDb. I type in the words Hider in the House. For some reason, Hider always looks like it's not spelled correctly to me every time I've typed this in or read it. But it's Hider in the House. This gets a 5.9 out of 10 with 2,000 ratings. There's no rank out of anything. Nobody's watched this. It's not a super popular movie, but it should be. We'll start with the storyline and the plot. We'll go to whichever one's on the top, because if they didn't want it to be read first, they wouldn't put it on the top. It says, a deranged man hides in the attic of a new house and becomes obsessed with the unsuspecting family that moves in. And then if we scroll on down to the storyline, thank you very much for nothing, because for some reason the storyline is different now. What I'm looking at, it had a name on it attached before, and now it doesn't. Such is life. It says a deranged man, Tom Sykes, hides out in the attic while an unsuspecting couple, Rogers and McKean, and their family carry on their life in the house below. Once Tom stops just hiding out and becomes involved with the family, and, in particular, the wife, the problems begin. An original USA made-for-cable movie. Bullshit.
It's not. It's got a theatrical
release. It is, exactly, in the UK for 1 week. It didn't get
much of what... Yeah, well, that's... Okay, so this only got a 1 week theatrical release for a couple reasons, but this was his last movie. Gary Busey's in this movie. This is his last movie before
He's in this movie?
accident. Yes, we're going to get to more of that. And the media company or whatever, they went out of business like as this movie was finishing production, so that kind of fucked up the reception it was supposed to get and why it got such a small theatrical release. It probably did spend a lot of time on stuff like Up All Night or, you know, those types of late night cable channels like USA, but that's not the only thing it had.
Well, it was Vestron Pictures, which did mostly horror. They still put out like Vestron DVDs, and I don't know if I think they Blu-rays.
I'm sure they're owned by someone else at this point. But
yeah, probably Lionsgate or somebody. I think Dream a Little Dream, which we talked about during the Blown Away episode really briefly, was a Vestron release as well.
So that little sidebar aside, that was a bad choice of words. Sean, who's in this movie?
All right, so it's another real small cast. I'll concentrate on the 4 people that I deem most important. We'll start with Gary Busey. He plays Tom the Hider. He's been, if you don't know who Gary Busey is, then shame on you, but he's Buddy Holly in the Buddy Holly story. He was in Point Break, Lethal Weapon, several great films that we'll be talking about this month. This movie must have been filmed, like you just mentioned, I wrote this down, but it was filmed prior to his motorcycle accident where he suffered brain damage and made him probably even more of a loose cannon than what we know today. It's also got Mimi Rogers playing Julie, the wife. She's the former Miss Tom Cruise, if you weren't aware. Her latest role was Honey Chandler in Bosch, but she has over 100 credits in her name, including Cruel Intentions 2, Ginger Snaps, and the Lost in Space movie. Another thing to add is all these actors, the 4 main actors I'm going to mention, between the 4 of them have like 800 credits or maybe 700 movie credits. Next up, we move on to Michael McKean. He plays Phil, the husband. He's David St. Hubbins in Spinal Tap. He's been in A Mighty Wind. He was in Better Call Saul, Saturday Night Live, Laverne and Shirley, 225 other.
I always think of him from Airheads.
Oh, okay, yeah. And 225 other movies. We've also got Bruce Glover, the neighbor Gene. He's a character actor. He's Crispin Glover's dad. I most recently saw him in Hunter's Blood, which I talked about last week, but he was also in Chinatown, Ghost World, and again, 100 plus roles, mostly in the 70s and before, but 100 nonetheless.
That was 4. Okay.
That's 4 by my count.
That's 4.
That's how many fingers I have.
We'll spare some of the is this the first time you watched it? Because I know that for neither of us it is. We mentioned, I think last week, maybe the week before, that we had a little romp at spring training in Florida. And this is one of the movies that we had watched down there. Sean, how did you stumble across this? Was this just because you are the one that found this movie? Full credit to you for that. All the applause in the world. Was it just finding the poster and thinking, what the fuck is this? I need to put it in there. Or did you have more knowledge of this one?
No, I hadn't heard of this before seeing the poster. I saw somebody posted about it on Reddit, and I saw the poster and I'm like, this poster is classic and I have to find this movie. I have to watch this movie because it's it'd make a great tattoo.
I would love to see the person with this tattooed on them, but yeah. So
might be one of us. I don't know.
Maybe we can put a picture of the poster up here because we brought it up. But basically the very shorthand of it is, what's her name? Mimi Rogers or whatever. Yep. She is laying on a bed, sleeping, doing sleepy stuff. And Gary Busey is pressed up against the window. Looks like he might be jerking off with one hand, but you can't see it, and just looks like a generic.
Yeah, it's all dark outside, so you can see him illuminated fully, and yeah, he's watching her.
So the real quick crash course of what this movie's about, because this is actually a pretty straightforward movie as far as what the plot is.
Yeah. Gary
Busey's getting, I guess he's in a halfway house to start, or some sort of thing
it's
along those lines.
Mental institution of some sort.
Well, it's hospital. Not though, because he's allowed to leave. But he's allowed to leave.
Hospital. It's a hospital. He got a check from the hospital. He's going back to the hospital to talk to his doctor.
I know he's going back to the hospital, but I'm talking about at the very beginning of the movie where he roughs up the dude who doesn't have his mail or something like that. That looks more like a halfway house. But whatever.
Oh yeah, he's in a flop house. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. So he's getting. That's fine. So I can be
I'm passionate about this movie, John.
I can tell. Jesus. Even when I get something right, I'm so fucking wrong. Anyway, Gary Busey's basically on this release flophouse / therapy program. They don't really tell you much about what the program is. All they really tell you is that he was abused as a kid. He burned down his house and in the process killed both his parents. It's kind of left up to the viewer if that killing of the parents was intentional or not. I think we get, at least at the beginning of the movie, you kind of, see where it goes later. He starts with 2 therapy sessions left. He's leaving the first of those 2 therapy sessions, says, I'm going to get a house. And basically is off to the world, finds this, it's not quite a mansion, but it's movie house. So way bigger than what a house of poor people would need to be. And basically just walks into an open construction site, builds a little room in the attic of this house, sets up some like Spider-Man grippies on the side of the house, and starts squatting from that point on. The family moves in and we are off. Essentially, we go from there, and as the movie goes on, he obviously becomes more dangerous throughout the movie, and at least the second time I watched it, I'm like, I wonder what his intent, like if they were trying to imply that his intention was to maybe not like get to everywhere this goes, but to like kind of blend in with this, whoever moves into this house to begin with, or if he was just planning on squatting in this little hole the whole time. It's never really explained, but it gets dark and interesting to go from there.
I have to say, like, him adding this little room onto the attic. So he builds it on the end of the attic. So if you were just looking at it, you'd be like, how come I'm missing like 5 to 10 feet of my attic? Why is this wall
and
here?
Several windows that, at least one giant window that I can see from the outside that I cannot see inside the house.
Yeah. How come I don't have this here? Maybe it's just a facade, you know? But yeah, he painstakingly puts the boards and all that stuff that he finds in this construction site. The one thing that I found really kind of curious about that is you can't really see the light in between the boards when it's night and he has a light on inside. So he must have put some kind of tar paper or something to block the light, but they don't really ever go into that. They just kind of make it like he's stacking boards and he makes a little door and all this shit. But it's pretty ingenious, I have to say.
It's very well built. It's also surprising that you can't see the outline of the door that he builds, because he builds I guess it'd be an interior door that goes into the attic and down into the house. And they open it several times throughout the movie. But when the door is closed, this just looks like a solid wall. Like there's no obvious break that's in the shape of a door where it looks like it would swing open with any type of ease.
Yeah, it's like between studs. So it blends in. You can't even see it.
All of a sudden, we have a whole family in the house. They have a dog. The dog instantly is like, some bullshit's going on here. Goes immediately to Gary Busey and then shortly gets, killed after that because, you got to have your little squatty hole. And yeah, for some reason, basically you see Gary Busey start coming out of his little hiding spot. And this is what makes this movie great, is it's kind of ingenious how he builds this room. He makes it, I don't want to say it looks good. Like it's not exactly good living conditions, but it's probably a little bit bigger than a jail cell.
Better than a treehouse.
Yeah, better than a treehouse, etc. It has heat, presumably. But he's a fucking moron through this whole movie. Like he's walking down into the house, he's eating food, he's moving shit around. As the story progresses, he is just acting more and more like all this shit in this house is his.
Yeah, he gets more and more brazen as the time goes on.
Yes.
Like he feels like he can just do whatever he wants.
But as he's doing that, he also becomes dumber as it goes on. Like the things that he does,
stupider and more daring.
And as he's doing this, we also, aside from the dog, we also see, people start disappearing. It starts with, spoilers for a little bit. I won't go all the way to the end, but it starts with an exterminator that comes up there and he very clumsily gets rid of him. And then there's another person in the movie that eventually gets, dead and
taken care of,
gets rid of her. We never really see what happens to these bodies. They disappear. It's kind of implied that they're buried somewhere in the backyard, but I don't really know because they prove that he killed them, like to the family that's living in this house, but they never really, aside from the dog, find any of the remains. So it's just kind of left up to interpretation, I guess.
One of the people,
that, right?
Well, one of the people does, the exterminator person, they show him, it's like next to the raised patio where he's coming up with a shovel, like a spade and all this stuff. Yeah. And the other person, they do show him in the act of burying them because like headlights or something go across like where he's burying them and he gets all paranoid. But that's like, that's like a pretty late stage thing in this movie.
I don't know if I mentioned or not. Again, in his head, he becomes romantically involved with the mother of this family. There's some other relationship shit that happens between the mom and the dickhead dad who is whatever. But yeah, it just works into actually I'm going to put it out there. It's a pretty poorly acted but tightly told story that kind of gives you a pretty good beginning, middle, and end. Like the dialogue choices are really fucking weird, especially, well, I'll get to that in a minute. So Sean, tell me some of the things that you like about Hider in the House.
Well, what I wanted to start with the Wikipedia entry for this movie, because I took a look at it, and during the only production notes that are in Wikipedia are this. It says, a psychologist was hired as an advisor to make sure the psychology of the Tom Sykes character was as realistic as possible. After a meeting with the psychologist, Gary Busey was excited, saying it was an NAR film. He explained that NAR meant no acting required. Gary said, I am the character. Now, I don't know if this was pre-head injury or after. I have a question for you before I get into my likes. So the dog comes up and he sniffs out Gary Busey living in the attic, like right away. And at first he sprays him with hairspray or something to make their bug spray or something to make the dog go away. And later on the dog comes back and it's barking and he, no spoil. I mean, a little bit of a spoiler, but it happened so early in the movie. We already talked about it. He kills the dog. How did you feel about that?
I don't like it because I don't like seeing the dog die, but they don't show the dog die. Everything is obviously not happening to this dog. Like when he sprays the dog with whatever he's spraying it, they're just having a dog freak out on the other side of the wall. There's no aerosol getting pushed in his face or anything. They don't actually show anything happen to the dog. So I don't like it. I don't want to I don't care to see it, by that, I mean, like, the act of it being in the movie, but you don't actually physically see it in the movie, and I don't think that this animal was actually hurt, so, I mean...
Is it better or worse than a handicapped child bouncing a basketball near a dog?
In this case, it's better, because I think he hit the dog with a basketball in that.
I don't think he does. We should go back to the tape at some point, but I just wanted to get your gauge on the dog, the man-on-dog violence.
So, no, I don't like it, but, I mean, it's also... not played in a way that's like most of the things in this movie to be taken seriously.
Okay. Well, I will disagree with your point that you made earlier that it's shittily acted. I think the acting is actually pretty convincing. Like Busey plays this character as a person that's been put in this situation, and we have the other main characters. I think they do pretty well with what they're given.
Maybe I should rephrase it. I think Busey is actually pretty good in this movie. Granted, he's playing a fucking nut and a crazy, like, psychopath. Well, maybe psychopaths, or I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
It's kind of right up his alley, though.
Yeah, he plays a guy that's very clearly got some major fucking issues, and it does kind of speak to the time when this came out. Like, there's a scene in this where, like, he goes to his second appointment or whatever that we know about, and his shrink, in the middle of his appointment, calls his boss, is like, get down here now, in so many words. And Gary's going on about, like, beating the shit out of people to protect his house or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
And he's like, hold on a minute. And he literally walks out and says to the, whatever his boss is, the, doctor, whatever. He's like, hey, this is a really bad idea to, like, let him out of our control or whatever. Like, I don't know can't put my finger on it, but something's not right here. And the boss is basically like, get him out of here. Like, he's fine.
Yeah.
So
we don't need this drain on the system.
Yeah, it kind of speaks to what, quite honestly, mental health and like mental health assistance was in this time frame. Like, people just got thrown back out on the street to do whatever. So there's that level of it. It's like, all right, that feels moderately realistic. Where I think the acting is really stupid is primarily between the dad, Michael McKean's character, and Mimi Rogers. I think those two, more so Phil than Mimi Rogers. Phil just is, maybe this is because whenever I see him, I associate him with his like annoying dipshit character in other movies, but he just comes off like a piece of shit. Like the kind of person that's like, they move into this nice house, they have all this good stuff going on, and literally the first day at work, he's back yelling at his wife, like, you fucking bitch, you lost my papers, I need to just fucking know. Like, he's just a piece of shit. And it's very much so just, they go from like perfect happy family, one boy, one girl, one dog, like big house, all that, to overnight just, oh, you dumb bitch, give me my gun and my gin and I got to go back to work. And it rolls right into that. Like the next morning, she's like, oh, am I going to see you today? Nope, I got to work. Fuck you. I'm out of here. Blah, blah, blah. That type of thing. So there's no real, like, his character mostly is the problem. And then Mimi's character, or Julie's character, the character Julie, I guess she's better in this. I just think that for whatever reason, like every creep in this movie, and by that I mean Gary Busey and Bruce Glover, just have raging like diamond cutter boners for this woman. And I don't want to say she like kind of encourages it, especially, well, she definitely doesn't for Bruce Glover's character, but maybe for the Tom Sykes character she does. She just seems kind of like too innocent and dumb for this. And this whole movie takes place over the course of about a week, give or take a day or two. And in the course of that week, she, spoilers a little bit, she moves into a new house. She gets her kids in a new school. She finds out her husband's having an affair. She kicks her husband out, and she's considering dating this psychopath that's teaching her kid how to like beat the living fuck out of people on their front lawn in like a 5 to 7 day
I don't think that
span.
she's considering dating him, but
They kind of say that between her and her friend, but whatever.
no, they really they don't. They don't say that. The friend
kind of
implies that, yeah, if you're not into him, I'd take him off your hands. Which
my point is, for everything that's happening in this household, I don't buy her character being so not emotionally distraught. She seems very willing to just go on with her day mostly. I don't know. She sucks.
I don't think that's true. I mean, I don't agree with you at all about that, but it's okay. You can be wrong. It's fine. It's happened before. It'll happen again. So you want to get into likes, since I think we've talked about everything but likes so far. I think first, you hit it like really early on. I think it's pretty cool. I don't know if cool is the right word. I think it's pretty amazing, or a lot of forethought was put in that Busey covers his tracks. He builds that like hidden ladder. I don't know with what, like 2x4s or miscellaneous shit on the side of the house. So he doesn't always have to go through the house to get out and get in. And he hacks the intercom system. So he's like, I don't know. He's like Kevin Mitnick. He can tune in any individual frequency in the house for any individual intercom to figure out where he needs to listen to hear what he needs to hear about the family. So he can kind of ingrain himself in it, which I think is pretty, for a guy that spent most of his time in a mental institution, he's doing all right for himself.
He is clever. So this movie actually looks really good. Like, it's shot really well. It's lit really well. And the scene that I think it happens a couple times, but the scenes that really highlight that for me the best, they put these giant, like, they have to have these giant like spotlights or something behind the house. And they show Gary Busey climbing up, and then like kind of you see just a Gary Busey silhouette. And you can hear him the whole time. He's like climbing around on the roof, stomping around. No one hears him somehow. And he's like, like crawling to different windows and stuff. It's very goofy and comical for a movie that shouldn't be very goofy and comical. And that's one of my favorite things. It's just the look of a silhouette of Gary Busey on the roof, chuckling and shuffling around from window to window, depending on where he's going to peer in at any given moment.
He's almost kind of like leprechaunish, cackling to himself
a little bit,
that he can
a little bit
traverse this place. I like this whole schoolyard drama that ensues in this movie. So the son, so not only the schoolyard drama, but Tom himself, Gary Busey, getting involved in it is just ridiculous. Like, the kid goes to a new school, Neil goes to this new school, and there's another kid named Bernard, which I don't think anybody named Bernard has ever bullied anybody else, but the son Neil gets picked on, and he kind of he's new at the school, and he tries to ingrain himself with like the cool kids or whatever. And he's like, oh, the flaming dog dude trick. And they're like, not flaming dog dude, dickhead. It's flaming dog shit. And this just becomes this whole thing. But after he gets picked on, Tom listens in on the whole conversation about Neil crying to his mom about being picked on. And he starts to kind of like take the kid under his wing. And you kind of touched on it with him training him some BJJ in the front yard to like incapacitate this poor like elementary school kid. So I thought that was pretty amusing watching it, especially watching it the second time and kind of seeing how he just puts himself in this situation, Tom that is, to kind of get in the middle of these kids fighting.
He actually, it's pretty well done. And again, credit to Gary Busey. Like, he plays it off pretty well as, again, at this point, we know he's listening to what's going on in the house through his intercom system that apparently is always on, and no one seems to think anything of it. He does a pretty good job of inserting himself in situations at the right time to kind of intervene and come off as just like apparently unemployed neighborhood good dude, as opposed to Gary Busey hiding in your attic. So yeah, I think he does that well. I like some of the extra characters that aren't in here very much. And I mean, we mentioned Bruce Glover. Like I consider him very much so like a side character. He's ultimately the hero of this movie, but he's not like a main character. I like that the guy that plays Joe from the produce stand in Seinfeld plays the exterminator. He's very like old worldy Italian type guy, sort of. Even like the people that he, being Gary Busey, interacts with, like in the restaurant, in the hotel, when he's going to like set up, the idiot husband, they just kind of play off of these as these good little like tertiary characters that they don't really, with the exception of Bruce Glover, they don't really add a ton to the movie, but they all interact and kind of fit in there in a way that's like, okay, you're moderately interesting for the like 2 seconds that you're on screen.
Yeah, and I like that Busey is not like, he's not a likable guy. Like this character is not a likable person, but
I don't think any of the men in this movie are likable.
Oh no, they're all kind of
except for maybe the exterminator. So.
Yeah, he didn't do nothing. He was just doing his job. But
right,
I think what makes this movie so kind of far-fetched and ridiculous and is basically how he's like the Batman of the house, right? He's like,
yeah,
he defends the house, he defends the kids, he's on top of everything. And like all good villains, I don't know about you, but I felt like I did. I started to root for him a little bit, like, oh, Tom's going to do some good work. Like, even though he's doing really shitty things, you're kind of like, you're along for the ride. You want to see what he does next. I mean, he comes up with this whole system to live in this house totally undetected. And I kind of started to like him a little bit, but when I liked him up to a point, and there's something that happens in the movie that we won't spoil, but there's something that happens that the switch immediately flips and he becomes like, he gets caught in the house. Let's just say that. And it just turns him into like, you're like, oh, this guy is so despicable. Like he was doing all these things, he's falling in love with this woman. He's trying to help out the family since the dad, of course, he kind of sets up the whole plan in motion and everything. He's a little bit too smart for what his character should be, but I don't know. I just like the whole arc of him kind of being this loser, and he, has this mental problem clearly, and he starts to become this likable guy, and then he just fucks himself over and just like dive bombs it straight down into the cement. You're like, oh no, I can't like this guy anymore. I just like the whole arc of that character.
I'll agree with you that I like the character arc. I won't go as far to say that I thought he was likable, because for me, there's always something about him through the entire movie that you're like unsure about. At least up until you said that point where you're like, okay, I'm not unsure anymore. So like, because he kind of plays it as like down in his luck idiot almost, who's almost like just smart enough to be dangerous, and then you find out he's just dangerous enough to be stupid or something. What's really good about his character, though, is he is intriguing. He does just enough, like you said, up until we get basically to maybe just before the third act. He does just enough to make you kind of think, I don't know that I'm not going to go as far as say I'm rooting for this guy, but I definitely want to see where this is going. And that's just as good. It draws you in. And I will say, for a movie that's an hour and 46 minutes long, although I would probably want to see maybe 10 minutes trimmed out of this somehow. Don't ask me like where to do that. Like I can't think of one particular scene or something like that to cut out. But if you could have tightened this up by about 10 minutes, off the runtime, it probably would have been just a little bit better. But, that's
we're not editors.
Common complaint. I mean, outside of just like, okay, the other thing I'll say I really liked about this movie, and then we can go and kind of flip it. I'm going to lead this with something I liked and then kind of flip it into something that's kind of also a negative. I really enjoyed this movie watching it with other people that could talk shit about this movie while it was on, because I've said it several times. I think you have too. Gary Busey in this movie is pretty clever, borderline ingenious at times, but he's also a fucking idiot through this entire movie. There's like, he's putting on Phil's bathrobe and wandering around the house and doing just all these dumb things. He's like stomping around in an attic. Anyone who's ever had someone live above them or had multiple stories, been in a house with more than one floor, you hear everything when it's above you. Like it's pretty dumb in that aspect, but at the same time, because they just go along with it. They even have a point early in the movie where Phil's like, oh, it's a big house. It makes noises. Like,
it's settling.
Big houses fart all the time. Like, that's just what they do. You know?
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed watching this movie with, you know, an audience that could kind of talk shit freely about it and kind of laugh at the same things. The flip side of that is when I watched it again this week to just kind of refreshing on it, even though it only been a week or two since I had seen it. I'm not going to go as far to say like it ruins everything to watch it by yourself. Like, it's not bad or anything like that. But that part of the fun of this movie was gone because there's no one there to talk shit with it about. Like, you can't say, look at this asshole. Look at what he's like. I did that, but the dog just looked at me like I'm going back to sleep. That's kind of the thing, like the biggest difference between the last time I watched this and this time, and kind of the bummer for me was like, this was a lot better with other people to like see the same dumb things or catch that dumb thing that maybe I blinked and looked away at, that type of thing. Which is really weird to say for what's essentially a home invasion movie.
Yeah, it's like a reverse home invasion or something. He's invading the house, but he lives in it.
Yeah, something like that.
I have one scene I want to point out as being like one of my, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's the one that kind of freaked me out both times that when we watched it together and when I watched it again separately. There's this whole scene where after Phil leaves, Julie gets drunk by herself. And she gets so drunk, she just like passes out on her bed, and Busey comes in and he gets real close to her and he's kind of like smelling her or something. And then he sits in the rocking chair and he's staring at her and he
doesn't he
just
do
falls
the daughter
asleep.
Too? Like get weird.
No, she sees him at night when she like goes to get, I don't know, go to the bathroom or something. But he falls asleep in this rocking chair. And the thing that like freaks me out is when people are laying down. And when when you lay down and you open your eyes, if someone's sitting near, they can't necessarily see your eyes. And sometimes, because I wear glasses and I take them off, and you wear glasses too, you take them off at night and you kind of can't really see, and you can't tell if someone's eyes are open or not. That would just freak me out. Like I don't know, if I was Gary Busey, I don't think I could ever fall asleep in a room with someone that didn't know I was in the room with them and just have that much carefree, just stupidity, brazenness, just to be like, yeah, I'm living in your house secretly, and I'm just going to fall asleep in this room with you. I don't know. It's kind of freaked me out watching it this time, especially.
The fact that he gets out of that situation undetected is one of the most,
is a miracle.
How the fuck did you pull that off moments in this movie? And I won't say how, because I kind of hope people do go watch this. I'd like to hear like other people tell us how.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. The fact that he gets out of that just undetected, it's like, no fucking way. Like, no fucking way.
And I do have to point out that Tom, he's clearly into the 3 C's: cinema, the circus, and coffee. He knows what's good. Outside
of that scene, do you have any other negatives you want to point out?
Oh, those aren't negatives. I have additional negatives. And I think kind of touching on what you touched on, he's living in this attic space, and how could they not hear him?
Right.
He's like legit living in the attic. It's not like he's just in the attic once in a while. He's got like a hot plate. He's listening to his hacked intercom. He's
going in and out of a window. That's like it. I didn't measure it, but it looks like it's roughly like at least a 50-inch in diagonal window. Like it's about the size of a modern TV. So
yeah, I don't know how they don't hear him. Yeah, they don't hear him at all. Yeah. They don't smell any of his smells. They don't have any of that. I love that. It's on my dislikes, but I think it's funny that he's like this frequency freak that he just knows how to tune in exactly the intercom thing to know he can just listen wherever he wants. And I think, like you mentioned, the pacing for me is like, it's an hour and 48 minutes. It doesn't feel like it's that long, but the pacing isn't off. It just, like you said, there's something feels like it could have been done to just shorten that up. For whatever reason, however.
I didn't notice the runtime at all the first time we watched it.
Yeah,
like when we watched it with other, and could talk shit about it. When I watched it this time, I found the second time, like by myself, I found myself kind of doing a lot more like, I know what's coming up. I know nothing really happens here, and kind of putzing around on my phone for 5-10 minutes at a time, looking up for the part that I wanted to see and that type of stuff. I don't know if you would call that pacing, because realistically,
it moves the whole time.
Yeah, and even when it's not like weird, creepy things, like it's actually setting up a story. It is actually setting up a plot, getting to the plot point. It's developing characters. It's all that type of stuff that you expect to see in a well-told story. So it does all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, at an hour 48 minutes for a movie that is at the heart of it a fairly simple story, like there's no like, you know, Scream twist ending where all of a sudden there's another guy in the house and whatever. Like,
spoilers, there's another guy in the house.
Yeah, it's nothing like that. So for a movie that's kind of at the heart of it, a fairly simple story. Again, I don't know if you just trim down little bits and somehow work that out to several minutes to get it lower, or if there was another movie that I watched recently and was on a different show for, and I was like, it has a similar complaint. It was like almost 2 hours long. I was like, you could just take this entire character out of the movie. You would miss nothing and save that 20 minutes. There's no one like this in this particular movie, like that I'm beating around the bush with. But it's weird because it's too long, but at the same time, it's like, doesn't feel like it's paced poorly.
Yeah. I don't know how you fix that, but yes, I agree.
Yeah, I don't either. That's not my job. So.
Right.
What else is there in this that's worth saying? I actually don't want to like shit on this movie a ton. Like, it's funny because it's one of those movies that's like, if you really want to pick this apart, aside from, well, I kind of am. Like, it's one of those movies that if you really want to pick this apart and get into the logic of, like we've already said, he's living in the attic, no one hears him, this is fully implausible, etc., then it's a dumb movie. But like, if you're just kind of going along with what the movie's telling you, it's kind of hard to really argue too much against it unless you just want to be nitpicky as shit.
Yeah, I feel like the negatives were like nitpicking. I had to really think about what, just suspension of disbelief or whatever kind of things.
Right. And again, I've already said my piece. I don't like the character of Phil. I think he's a fucking idiot. Like, he annoys the hell out of me. Bruce Glover does look really weird in this movie.
Yeah, you should watch Hunter's Blood.
Well, I mean, he's looking at me in his, IMDB picture right now. And in fairness, he's kind of a weird looking dude to begin with, but
yeah, that picture, he looks like the Squirrel Master for sure.
A little bit. I mean, it's funny because, like I said, he ends up being the guy that saves the day in this movie, but he very much so. They play him. Would you go as far to call him a red herring in this? Because they almost play him like that.
I think a little bit, but he, like you said, he does end up helping out at the end, but he's like the obstacle or something for Tom. Like that's how Tom kind of becomes endearing to Julie, because he's like fending off the advances of this neighbor who's just a creep.
Well, and there's no doubt about it that Tom is the bad guy in this movie. They make that abundantly clear pretty quick in the movie. So the idea of him almost being Gene or Bruce Glover being a red herring is almost kind of moot unless it's going to go into some kind of Scream fucked up like twist ending to it.
They both live in the attic. There you go.
There you go. You got anything else you really want to add on this, or
no? Let's cook them up.
Fire it up.
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
So I'm gonna lead off on the inaugural Gary Busey month. I don't know if there will be another one, but this is the first. Higher in the House is, at the end of the day, it's actually a pretty decent movie. Even if you take all the things about it, like just as a film, it's a decent film. It tells a good story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. The story is believable enough if you let yourself get over the dumb shit that we've already talked about. Gary Busey is surprisingly decent in this. He plays this role pretty well, and most of the people around him are there. Some good, some bad, up for debate. And if you can watch this with a couple guys having a couple beers or someone that you can like joke with, this movie's a blast. It's a lot of fun and will keep you engaged the whole time. If you're watching it by yourself, it's still a good movie, but you're going to kind of get to a point where you might feel like it's dragging a little bit. So definitely do this one in a group setting if you have the opportunity. I'd give it probably a solid like 3/4 of a hot dog. I don't know that I'm going to want to watch this again anytime soon, but if the circumstances are right, I'm not going to immediately be like, get out of here. I don't ever want to see that again. It's more good than bad.
Whose hot dog is this? That's yours?
I'm going to pretty much mirror a lot of what you said. I think this is the perfect movie to sit around with a bunch of buddies and laugh about, which is what we did when we were on our trip. And I think it's a really great mix, especially with a group, but I think it's a great mix of serious, silly, and batshit, like on top of it. Busey always plays like a menacing, unhinged character really well. And I think it's kind of a shame that this one, for his sake, went really unnoticed, like the whole issues with the studio and getting like a weak release in the UK, which I think it was planned to have like 1,200 screens or something. Because while he comes across as this really crazy person, I think he also comes across as kind of like a sympathetic, like not necessarily likable, but you feel kind of bad for him.
He does
because of the hand he's been. Yeah, exactly. Even after all the unlikable things that he does, he still comes across as like a sympathetic character in a way. I think it's a really good ensemble cast. Like I said, of those top 4 people, there's like hundreds of credits, probably like 600 to 700 credits between all 4 of them. I got to give it a full hot dog. I will watch this again. I think it's a movie that I would wholeheartedly recommend if you like stuff that we talk about on the show. And all I know is when they sell that house, someone's going to be able to buy it for cheap, but it will have an extra bedroom in the attic for whoever's staying over. It's like a little hidden tree house.
You go up there and stay in Busey room. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Yeah. I'll be back after the Busey suite.
That's right. So speaking of the Busey suite, we have a question of the week. And this week we ask you, the amazing audience, imagine moving into your new dream home, only to discover, much to your shock, that Gary Busey has been living in your attic. How would you handle this bizarre situation? So we are going to start over on Instagram, and No Yeah Totally Dude is the first to respond, and he says, we're taking it out over a 12-pack of domestic beer and a carton of cigarettes. I like that he went with domestic beer. He's not shelling out for the good stuff. This is just going to be a straight Miller and, I don't know, Marlboro kind of night to get Gary Busey out of your garage. Still on Instagram, we have our friends over at Dissect That Film. They say he lives there forever. You cannot kick Gary Busey out. It's one way to handle it.
Nobody puts Busey in a corner.
That's right. So our friend Average Drewski, he says, I would tell him that he can stay there rent free, but he has to do live streams with me and record videos all the time while I'm playing video games. Taking up the Twitch streaming mantle is Gary Busey. Over on Blue Sky, we didn't have any responses on Facebook or Threads. You can respond there, but we didn't have them there. We have Aaron at superpodsaga.com says, I'd befriend him by offering him a small animal as tribute, and then I'd train him to attack intruders and poop outside. Our friends over at You Can Eat That Crust said, that's easy. I would leave a trail of methamphetamines and booze leading him to the front door and promptly lock him the fuck out. Alternatively, you could just have Predator 2 playing on the TV downstairs and shoot that net launcher thing at him when he gets downstairs.
Viable. That's a viable answer.
Very well thought out. At the 80s Movie Podcast says, I'd move him down to one of the bedrooms, make sure he has a mini fridge that is always well stocked, and let him take me wherever he wanted to go. Gary Busey is awesome, and I'd be proud to have him as a sidekick. To which Aaron at Superpod Saga responded, I love the idea of him hiding in your attic until the day you discover him living there, and then he's suddenly the main character of your life. Plenty of options on how to deal with a wayward Gary Busey. It seems like more people than not want to befriend him. Sean, do you have an answer for this one?
I don't know. Is this like current day Busey or is it pre-accident Busey?
Dealer's choice.
Oof. I don't know. Either way. I think I liked him, Buddy Holly. I thought he was kind of endearing. I'm actually kind of afraid of him now. It's like those people that are mentally unstable. Like, I don't know so much about Mike Tyson now, but Mike Tyson, like when he was in his prime, would not be someone I would ever want to be around because he'd just scare the shit out of me. Like, what's he going to do next? Just people who are unpredictable, loose cannon, like fly off the handle, short fuse people. I'm a short fuse person, but I can't be around people that are unpredictably or that have unpredictable short fuses, I guess.
If it were me and I moved in to a home and Gary Busey was hiding in my attic, I would feed him Lee's Pizza from Lee's Grocery down in Tampa, Florida, and wait for him to shit himself and then kind of scurry him outside and lock my windows after that. Perhaps take the boards that he made a wall out of and use them on the windows as reinforcement. That's right.
Board up them windows.
I, like you, do not need a Gary Busey living in my house. I prefer him living in my TV where he belongs, and that's about enough.
Agreed. We can agree on that thing, John.
Yeah, well, we've both actually watched this movie. We know what happens. So ends poorly for some people. Anyway, you got anything else you want to tack on here before we wrap this one up?
No, sir.
All right. Well, in that case, for those of you who answered, thank you for answering the question of the week. We post those on our social media. You can find all those social medias at Dewey Podmonster on all the ones that we post on. You can also find all of our episodes at crap.town. That is our site. You can leave us feedback there. You can tell us how much you hate the show, how much you love the show, all that stuff. It goes directly to us. You can also request episodes. Maybe there's a Gary Busey movie that you want us to watch. Maybe it's Surviving the Game. Maybe we've already talked about that 100 times on this show, and I don't know. It's Gary Busey month. Whatever it is, you can leave those messages there at crap.town or at Rockin' Tomatoes. And of course, you can find all of our episodes at yourunpodcast.com. And please check out someone else while you're there. There's a lot of great shows on the You Run Podcast Network. Go find one that you can add to your listening rotation. Sean, what am I forgetting?
Well, I would just add, if you want your answer to the question of the week read on the show, if it, I don't know, hits the threshold of greatness that we expect, then you can find that on all the social medias at Dewey Podmonster. If you're interested in anything that we talked about on the show, it will be linked in the show notes. We try to make it free if we can, but if it can't be found for free, it'll probably be an Amazon affiliate link. Those are affiliate links. If you click those links, you watch something, you buy something via those links. Whatever money you spend, we get like a very, very, very small percentage, but it's probably the best way to help the show. The other way, if you want to help the show, recommend the show to your friends. Leave a review. Tell somebody about it. Say, hey, these guys are stupid and they talk about stupid shit. You might like it because you're stupid and you like stupid shit too. Other than that, if you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Blue Sky. I am at internal-bleeding.bisky.social. I post little clips of silly, stupid shit that I find or stupid, silly shit that I watch. And I posted recently a really cool song about Sega Gremlin from 1981. And it's pretty cool. You should go check it out.
I don't remember if I watched this already or not. I will go check it out immediately after this.
Friends helping friends.
So that's what we're here for. So that's it. Until next week, we'll be back. Have yourself a great week. Swill up. I think that's what he says. 2 weeks in a row now. I can't remember. But we'll be back next week with more Busey shenanigans.
Blah, blah, blah.